2024 has been a really interesting year for gaming. Even with the industry going through a rough time, a hell of a lot of good games have come out this year, especially in the indie sphere. It's that time of year when everyone's doing their end-of-year roundups of the best games released this year, but they can get a bit repetitive because all the same games come up again and again. So I thought instead I'd do a roundup of the 10 best games I've either discovered or played for the first time this year. Some of them came out this year, some didn't. Some are early access, but here are the 10 best games I've personally played this year. There's a lot of good games from 2024 I just haven't got round to yet, like Animal Well being a big one. But here are my favourite 10 games I've discovered this year. At 10 we've got Nova Drift. Nova Drift is an addictive, modernised take on old arcade games like Asteroids, which tightens up the design, employs lush, colourful graphics, and introduces roguelite's randomness and progression into it. You start off as a normal spaceship firing a fairly standard gun, and slowly but surely level up into a devastating killing machine. Given how similar the different runs are, the developers did an excellent job of making the game playable in a number of different styles. There's even the option of eschewing guns entirely and attaching 2 swords to the front of your ship, and that's probably my favourite way to play it. You'll want to unlock the Wild Metamorphosis mode for the true roguelite experience, and Draft mode for the glorious chaos of it. At 9 we've got Jump King. I'm really late to the party on this one, but Jump King is fantastic. Brilliant in its simplicity. Whoever designed it must have had a very sick mind, but those up for a genuine platforming challenge which borders on being masochistic will find much to like about Jump King. It's basically the Dark Souls of platforming games, totally uncompromising in and unapologetic of its difficulty. Missing one jump isn't necessarily the end of the world, but the problem is when you miss one, your focus and composure goes, and you miss 2 in a row. Those moments can be genuinely nerve-wracking. At 8 we've got Prey. I was even later to the party on Prey, but it's such an impressive game, and one of the better immersive sim games out there. Prey throws you into a compelling narrative which takes place on an isolated space station, and just tells you to figure out how to progress and handle your objectives yourself, without holding your hand at all. And the DLC, Prey Moon Crash, is heavily underrated and one of the most interesting implementations of roguelite mechanics I've seen in a game. Runs perfectly on Steam Deck too, if that's your thing. At 7 we've got Balatro. Now any roundup of 2024 that doesn't mention Balatro would be incomplete. One of the biggest success stories of the indie games industry of the year, in a year stacked with great indie releases, and a testament to the enduring power of a pack of playing cards, and the possibilities for entertainment that they offer. Like a chaotic sequel to the game of poker itself, an addictive, minimalist experience which absolutely deserves all of its success. At 6 we've got Path of Achra. Now, if the words character customization, build variety, or Rift Wizard mean anything to you, you must play this absolute gem. Path of Achra is a very finely streamlined dungeon crawler roguelike game where each run is very short and the gameplay is entirely focused around building, trying out different builds by combining the many different powers and equipment the game offers you, and seeing how far you can get. It's not an auto-battler, but you can basically play it like one, just throwing a build together and seeing how far you can take it. But you can also play it much more methodically and put together a build which requires more care and attention. It's really up to you. And the variety on offer here, the amount of different possibilities you have, is absolutely massive. And you can make almost all of them work if you know what you're doing. For £8.50, a total bargain. At 5 we've got Halls of Torment. Now, Vampire Survivors-like games are ridiculously common now, but the Diablo-inspired Halls of Torment stands out from a crowded pack. One of the best games to release this year, and a hell of a lot of replay value for money. The nostalgic graphics, the grim tone, tight mechanics, and ARPG-inspired loot system were inspired choices that took it far above its competition. One of the very best Survivors-like games out there, and perhaps actually the best. One of the earliest videos I did on the channel was a review of Halls of Torment, so do check that out if you'd like to hear more about it. With Path of Exile 2's early access release being just around the corner, this year I thought it was about time I at least played the first one, the game which captured the imaginations of so many and repelled just as many others with its famously overwhelming complexity. and it is complex, crazily so. I played it while following a build guide, and I was still overwhelmed. But what a game though. Great world, great story, absolutely brutal and grim. Great classes, great loot, great gameplay. It really is the complete ARPG package, and the sequel is shaping up to be even better. I did a video recently about my first impressions of Path of Exile in anticipation of the sequel coming out, if you'd be interested to hear me talk more about that. 3. Session Skate Sim. Now, I really didn't expect a skateboarding game to be one of my favourite games this year, but this one absolutely is. Session is fantastic. It looks and feels so good to play. It's so smooth and realistic, with so many well-designed maps inspired by real legendary skating spots. It's just brilliant. I play it almost every day now, even if only for 5 or 10 minutes or so, just to do a few tricks on a particular spot. The Schoolyard DLC is maybe the best map I've ever seen in a skateboarding game. Playing it inspired me to write a video about skating games and the psychology of flow, which you can check out on the channel if you like. I absolutely loved Session. Now at 2 we've got Hades 2. Even in its early access form, this is easily one of the best games of the year, and already has a lot more content in it than the original, which remains one of my favourite games ever made. Hades 2 had a tough act to follow, but it followed it with gusto. Then Hades 2 comes along with a new character, new weapons, new and returning gods, and basically does everything the original did, but more, and more deeply. Also, and I really think this is ingenious, the combat is changed in a way that reflects the character of the new protagonist. Zagreus' combat in the early game was fast, brash, arrogant, overwhelming his enemies with pure brute force and determination. Melinoe's, on the other hand, is more methodical, thoughtful, slower, and more careful, which reflects her temperament. Absolutely brilliant game, one which I'm sure will only get better with time. And at number 1 we have the amazing Caves of Qud. Having been in development for 15 years and in early access for 9, the immense sci-fi roguelike RPG Caves of Qud finally released this year. I've been aware of it for a while, but only properly got into it this year. For the scale, the world building, the variety, the freedom, the sheer weirdness, uniqueness and unbridled joy of it, this makes my number 1, the best game I've played all year. Every playthrough is a genuine adventure that never fails to surprise. You just never know what you're going to run into, the crazy, wonderful or disastrous things that are going to happen to you. It is a mammoth achievement of video game design and storytelling, and is one of the absolute best games in this genre, which is over 40 years old at this point. Tan Adams, one of the creators of Dwarf Fortress, one of the most influential and greatest roguelikes ever, said Caves of Qud is perhaps the greatest roguelike game ever made. I reviewed it when it released recently, and talked about its legendary capacity for emergent storytelling, and did another video where I talked about some of the best Steam reviews of it, which give a fascinating glimpse into the weird and wonderful possibilities of Qud. Some of them are absolutely hilarious. I don't just think Qud is one of the best games of the year, I would put it up there as being one of the best games ever made. And I think it will be looked back on as a landmark release in the roguelike genre, and revered for its procedural generation, storytelling and world building. Even though it has roguelike mechanics, even though it has RPG mechanics, the way they're implemented, the way the world is built, everything about how this game is made combines for an experience that is truly unlike anything else I have ever played. A thoroughly well-deserved number 1. Thank you so much for watching. What were your best games you've played this year? Do let us know in the comments. I'd be glad to hear from you and get some recommendations. Do like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content